Setiap pembentang akan mengambil masa 15 minit dan jika tuan-tuan dan puan-puan ingin bertanya soalan, bolehlah menggunakan kemudahan Q&A di aplikasi Zoom ini. Pembentang pertama pada pagi ini adalah Datin TPR Hajjah Mazrina Abdul Khalid dari Malaysian Institute of Planner dengan tajuk pembentangan perkenalan kepada perancangan Bandar Rendah Karbon. Datin TPR Hajjah Mazrina merupakan Naib Presiden Pertubuhan Perancang Malaysia MIP bagi penggal 2019-2020. Beliau mempunyai 24 tahun pengalaman dalam bidang perancangan bandar dan desa. Dipersilakan, Datin.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh and good day everyone. Today I would like to present low carbon city planning presented from Malaysia Institute of Planners. The content of my presentation today will cover 5 sections of low carbon city planning, starting with what are low carbon cities, commitments, and also the implementation of low carbon city framework itself. Talking about definition of low carbon cities, there is no universally applicable definition of low carbon city. However, there are many organizations throughout the world and in fact locally has tried to define low carbon cities. Among, as you can see on the screen, among of the definitions that has been put forward from ministry is cities and towns that pursue a systematic process to achieve ambitious greenhouse gases emission reductions. And from Plan Malaysia, they have also defined a city that comprises of societies that consume sustainable green technology, green practices, and emit relatively low carbon or GHG as compared with present day. Anyhow, all the definitions will refer to processes, systematic processes, will refer to monitoring of reduction of GHG or CO2 equivalent, and also monitoring of low carbon lifestyle. So that would basically fits into the definition of low carbon city planning. When we talk about low carbon cities, the features that will be deliberated and will be mentioned are mostly related to sustainable green technology, green practices, green economy, green infrastructure, low emission development, and also GHG inventory or CO2 reduction inventory. And when we talk about GHG, we will talk about types of GHG gases. And there are basically 7 common gases within the GHG, and carbon dioxide are gases released through natural processes such as respiration and volcano eruptions, and through human activities such as deforestation, land use changes, and burning fossil fuels. And CO2 gas is basically the most common gas within the GHG. So that is why it is always been referred to CO2 equivalent for the GHG gases. Yeah. So when we talk about carbon emission, we'll talk about calculation of carbon emission, and there are 2 types of calculating carbon emission. One is absolute base calculation, and another one is intensity based calculation. And the absolute base calculation is referred to calculation on scale and sector, refer to total quantity of greenhouse gas emissions being emitted. And intensity-based calculation is referred to the volume of emission per unit of GDP, which is the economic input, GDP either per capita or GDP as a whole. So example of absolute base calculation is, I'm giving you the example for Shah Alam. Shah Alam has actually calculated baseline calculation for its CO2 equivalent emission, about 53,000 metric ton CO2 equivalent. That is basically referring to absolute calculation. And when we talk about reduction of carbon emission, 45% intensity reduction per GDP per capita by 2030 as compared to 2005 levels, that is a national commitment that we have actually mentioned throughout our, our deliberation. That is referring to intensity-based calculation, the one that the national targets are putting. And why do we want to calculate carbon? In order for us to monitor or even start to mitigate our activities in terms of activities that emit carbon, we need to make sure that we would be able to calculate our carbon emission. How do we calculate carbon emission? First, we need to establish baseline data. So we have to have a baseline data and base year emission. Yeah. So the data has to be based on a certain year, and then we will have to identify emission sources and reduction opportunities. That would be in the scenario analysis. And then once we have that, we have to start setting targets. Setting targets. What is our target achievement in terms of the reduction? Once we have that targets, we would then develop action plan. Action plan, roadmaps are actually the same thing. So the roadmap and the action plan will actually charter all those actions and initiatives that a city or a project would want to be outlining in order to achieve the target. Then, once we have the action plan, it's time to track progress and benchmark against your baseline. So that is how you calculate your carbon emission, your progress of emission. Why low carbon city planning? It is very important that we we exercise low carbon city planning within the city area. Actually, both city and rural area, but most of the cities consume 75% of the world natural resources and account for 80% of global greenhouse gas emission. This is data from the United Nations. So the main sources of emissions came from energy, which is electricity consumption, mobility from vehicles, and also from waste, municipal solid waste that ends up in landfill. So basically, most of the activities are confined within this area because people are moving into the city area and start doing activities which emit a lot of carbon without they knowing it. And emission level, comparing Malaysia, Singapore and Indonesia per capita basis, Malaysia ranked 33rd emitter in the world rank in 2016, and Singapore ranked 20th contributor, and also Indonesia ranked 11th and 13th emitter in the world rank. This is per capita basis. As far as a commitment Malaysia at the national, state and local level, we have actually commit a lot of initiatives through programs and documents and policies. The most recent, starting from 2009, where Malaysia has actually committed at COP15 Copenhagen, where we have actually committed to reduce 40% intensity reduction in CO2 equivalent intensity by 2020 based on baseline 2005. And because of that commitment that we have made in 2009, in 2011, Malaysia has actually developed a document to guide cities in managing or reduction of CO2 within the city area, and that document is Low Carbon City Framework. It is launched in 2011. In 2014, Malaysia announced the reduction. We have actually achieved 33% CO2 equivalent reduction at United Nations Climate Summit New York. And we have also informed that we are actually following the targets. And in 2015 at COP21 in Paris, Malaysia again expressed our commitment that we would review our targets from 40% reduction to committing for a 40% CO2 equivalent reduction by 2030. So in 2015, we have actually expressed our new commitment of 45% reduction by 2030. 2016, Low Carbon City Framework version 2 has been introduced. This has actually reviewed a few components within the framework itself to making sure that the activities would be better monitored at the city level. In 2017, at COP23 in Bonn, Malaysia has again reported that we are still committing ourselves with the 45% reduction, and we are also on track in achieving our 45% reduction by 2030. And 2019, Malaysia has actually launching green technology application for low carbon city under Ministry of Environment and Climate, together with UNDP and SEDA under funding from Global Environment Facility. Commitment at Malaysia level and state levels are many. At the national level, there are a lot of documents that has been developed to highlight the importance of low carbon city planning. And these documents are stated in this slide here. Among them are Dasar Perubahan Iklim Negara, National Policy on Climate Change, Dasar Teknologi Hijau Negara, National Green Technology Policy, Rancangan Fizikal Negara, Malaysian Physical Plan, Dasar Perbandaran Negara, Green Technology Master Plan, Rancangan Malaysia, Low Carbon City Framework, and also guidelines that reflecting green neighborhood and so on and so forth. At the state level, there are many states has actually incorporated low carbon city planning into a lot of state documents. There are also Rancangan Struktur Negeri yang which has also incorporated policies to implement low carbon city planning within the document itself. And there are also Smart Selangor Mampan 2035 that incorporating low carbon city planning within the document to actually outline those initiatives for all the local authorities to adopt. And at Selangor level, there are also Pelan Tindakan Teknologi Hijau Negeri Selangor that specifically encourage all those local authority in Selangor to adopt low carbon city framework. At the that one at Selangor level. At Johor level, Johor has actually developed also low carbon society blueprint in guiding the local authority, especially within Iskandar region, to implement low carbon city planning. Same as Malacca, they have Green City Action Plan for all the PBT in Malacca to actually adopt low carbon city planning, and also sustainable development. Commitments at local levels, there are many local authorities at local levels has actually developed a lot of documents to guide the city players like developers, even the local authority themselves and other agency in terms of implementing sustainable development, implementing green initiatives, and also implementing low carbon development. As example, Majlis Bandar Shah Alam have also the document that guide them into developing into planning low carbon city within Shah Alam city, and they have Shah Alam they have for Subang Jaya has Pelan Tindakan Bandar Hijau. For Petaling Jaya, they have MBPJ Low Carbon City Action Plan, which manage them to monitor their carbon emission. For Sepang, Majlis Bandaran Sepang, they have Cyber Jaya Smart Low Carbon City. And then this is Pelan Tindakan Bandar Rendah Carbon Majlis Perbandaran Kelang, and also Pelan Tindakan Perbandaran Rendah Carbon Bandar Baru Bangi. That is under Majlis Perbandaran Kajang. Advantages of low carbon city planning are many, and we know that among them are to mitigate climate change at a higher level, and also by adopting low carbon city planning, energy can be optimized, can be used more efficiently, and we would also be achieving sustainable economy, efficient systematic management structure, improving economic status in the long run, and also the most importantly, improving quality of life. And all these basically to achieve the top three pillars of sustainable development, which is environment, community, and also economy. And one of the tools that we are promoting in terms of low carbon city planning is by adopting low carbon city framework. Low carbon city framework aims to provide guidance for local authorities, universities, and other regions on how to transform cities into low carbon cities. And though there are many other low carbon assessment tools nationally, there are different types of tools which measure low carbon, whether they're measuring it based on performance base or they are measuring it based on design base. So basically, if you're looking at this slide here, LCCF track and LCCF checklist is actually from the low carbon city framework, and low carbon LCCF track, and which is now an additional with low carbon challenge, low carbon city challenge. Those two are basically tools that being used by low carbon city framework, under the low carbon city framework, to calculate CO2 emission and CO2 reduction, and these are basically a performance-based calculation. For LCCF checklist, basically it is a criteria-based assessment that actually monitors, that actually guide the development in terms of low carbon city planning. And if you can look at the slide here, there are many other tools that are existing in Malaysia, which is GBI Township, GreenRE, MyCRES, GreenPass, PH, JKR, SASDEC, MyGHI, Melaka Green Seal, and also GASB Iskandar. Low carbon city framework has evolved from version 1 to version 2. The first one was launched in September 2011, the second one in October 2017, which has actually upgraded few of the performance criteria and sub-criteria. And the framework itself comes in two parts. The first part is basically serve as guide to use. The first part is basically the fundamentals of low carbon city planning. The second part is basically the assessment system, which is built in carbon calculator, that help user to determine the current baseline and also to monitor the reduction of the CO2 emission. The framework itself covers 4 elements, 15 performance criteria, and also 41 sub-criteria, which the 4 main elements are the urban environment, urban infrastructure, urban transportation, and also building. And under the urban environment, they have 3 performance criteria, which is site selection, urban form, urban greenery, and environmental quality. Under urban infrastructure, there are 4 performance criteria. Under urban transportation, there's 6 performance criteria, and under building, there's 2 performance criteria. And this performance criteria is further categorized by sub-criteria, which further guide the framework users to outline their low carbon planning. And part 2 of the framework, looking at the assessment system. There are 2 types of assessment system under low carbon city framework. One is the LCC 2030 challenge and another one is LCCF track. And both of these assessment system are basically performance-based evaluation, and these are used to measure carbon emission for a city or for a project. How does LCCF delivering SDG goals? LCCF framework basically will be able to achieve 10 SDG goals. These are basically the good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, sustainable cities, responsible consumption and production, climate change, life on land, and partnership for the goals. So basically LCCF that has been developed are not independent of SDG, but implementing LCCF would be able in a long run or would be able also to achieve SDG goals at the same time. I think that's all that we want to share with you. Should there be any further question, you can actually contact MIP. Thank you.
Ni.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Datin TPR Haja Mazrina Abdul Khalid di atas pembentangan yang menarik sebentar tadi. Seterusnya, saya ingin menjemput pembentang yang kedua iaitu AR Mustapha Kamal Bin Zulkarnain dari Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia dengan tajuk pembentangan How are cities to cope after COVID-19, the goods and the future. AR Mustapha Kamal Zulkarnain.
Aduh.
AR Mustapha Kamal Zulkarnain, an architect university alumni from the New Zealand, has been practicing architect for the past 27 years and is a fellow members of MIP, Malaysian Institute of Architect, Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, and has served 6 terms as PAM Council member 1997 to 2000 and 2014 to 2017. He is still a various in PAM committees.
Aduh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning.
Betul.
Thank you very much MDTC for this opportunity for me to do this webinar. Today I will be speaking how smart cities and resiliency will help to alleviate these pandemic issues in urban areas. I would like to share my screen now. Today I'll be speaking on resilient cities, how are cities to cope after COVID-19, the good news and the future. In my opinion, in relation to COVID-19 pandemic, people think that the year 2020 is the year of perfection. But it's now a different route. The year 2020 is humanity reset button. To think for a better system to govern our lives, to work and collaborate for better living, to rethink the way we need to work, to throw away unsustainable methodologies, to accept new collaborators and new game changers big time. To accept new collaborators and new game changers big time, to include the younger generation in our decision making in total, not a mere rhetoric. To use the thinking way out of the box, which is business unusual. To accept the thinking system of your subordinates more as a realistic one. to put aside only top-down thinking, to respect the bottoms-up thinking rationally and pragmatically, to listen to the ecosystems more than the economic system, to allow specialists to rule, to put aside generalists for fear of a recurrence, to live simplistically, to love life as priceless, to transcend urban protocol systems as living documents of life, to listen to your aspirations more than your fears. To be a human is most important. This is the poem that I coined just a day before our first lockdown in 18 March 2020. And the pandemic has actually created this whole bubble of problems. The moment that there was this MCO, these are some of the businesses that actually collapsed in almost immediately, like the events, lifestyle, tourist location, entertainment, then followed by others like education, fashion, professional services, and so on, until now, which is almost about close to 12 months. So this is how Kuala Lumpur looked like during the MCO, empty, deserted, as though the city has got no use to humanity, and people are now living in homes that are built by architects that create their own abode and also their safe haven. So in COVID-19 started just a day before the celebration of the 2020 New Year by the recurrence of 600,000 articles being sieved through by a doctor in Wuhan trying to look for similar things about the coronavirus, which was before a SARS virus. So that begins the whole journey until now of COVID-19. It's a beautiful virus, but it's a very deadly one. It can happen to a single person as well as a city of millions. In Wuhan, what they found out is the inadequacy of medical facilities, excessive urban population density, traffic congestion, weak public awareness of the pandemic, as well as the low level of public services and also insufficient open space have actually alluded to these problems and escalated this issue of COVID-19 spread. As we know, there are so many problems and challenges of cities, including about the problem of rich and poor gap, open space provision, transnational organized crime. Health issues is the one which is closely related to us, and I'll be speaking about that. Apart from just clean water, democratization, transportation, sustainable development and climate change, energy environment, energy gender equity, peace conflict, population resources, science technology, global ethics, as well as global foresight and decision making. So in order for us to do that, I think the city needs to be resilient. And one of the qualities of resilience is there need to be a combination of 5 items, which is smart, green, accessible, sustainable, and another thing which will relieve our minds will be the cultural and arts. It is actually how the city is developing its own capacities to absorb future shocks and stresses to its social, economic, and technical systems, as well as infrastructure, so it's still able to maintain essentially the same function, structure, system, and identity within a short space of time. And the city authorities need to balance their strategies as well as capacity and limitation in order for them to produce actions. So these are some of the 8 steps which most of it will actually attain to fast completion. That's where resilience is. You rebound quickly. So I'm promulgating the 4 P's, which is prioritizing, planning, protection, and provision in order for city authorities and also the stakeholders to be given a city which is so vibrant, vitality where health is of conscience, as well as value and also variety. You know, as a result of this COVID-19, when we are actually in these times that we are approaching 2030 for this SDG 17 items, there are about almost 15 of it are being affected. So it really takes a toll, and the city authorities and everyone in the stakeholders of the city has to work hard to elevate this problem. So smart cities is one way that it will combine with the resiliency, will elevate and also help to monitor as well as to ensure that the citizens' folks as well as the citizens' needs and also the city's infrastructure can go through this pandemic successfully. Smart doesn't mean it is intelligent only. It is about systems, monitoring, analysis, reconfigure and rethinking of the system that it has in order for the cities to move forward. There's so many elements and also indicators that will assist the smart cities to move forward. But in short, a lot of the smart cities will actually use the physical separation where the CMCO as well as TMCO in order to control this pandemic. So Wuhan has taught us to actually to build lots more of fast hospitals, to use public space and facilities to its fullest for its, how shall I say, healing corridors, to keep the children and young people safe, to improve the urban rescue capabilities, to strengthen urban warehousing, which is the logistics, to store food, to store medicine, to even store the PPEs in order for it to be used in times of emergency, as well as to strengthen the observation, protection, as well as for the community care institutions. So, in short, buildings are now going to be the secret weapon in future to combat infectious disease. So, buildings now will be the filter between us and the pandemic. So, there will be 3 prongs in order for us to move forward. It needs to be a systematic where smart cities and governance will upheld those principles. Reliability cities, where it will be the resilience and the urban design of the city. And the next part is the durability, where the healthiness of the city and sustainability for the city to move forward is very important. All these 3 must be orchestrated and work hand in hand in tandem and without fail of each other. So the healing corridors, as I was promulgating, is one way of us elevating this problem of pandemic, where they have found that sunlight and also good cross-ventilation in buildings will alleviate this spread of pandemics. Just similar to the cross-ventilation in the building, a city too needs to be cross-ventilated. That's where the healing corridors are very, very important. Renewable cities, that means to say that at ground level, the cities are actually have a free flow of air, free flow of, how should I say, breeze for it to be fresh and rejuvenated. So a smart cities will help us to ensure this, how should I say, moving forward towards the elevation of pandemic. You can see how drones technology, how the intelligence of how to make sure the lockdown, how to track information, how to actually use the logistic data, how to actually ensure that everyone knows what is happening and how it's going to be protected and how it's going to move forward is very, very important. And just like in Malaysia, we have this MAESCO app. It is a very important app. It will actually help the authorities and also help all the citizens to know where they were and how they are faring daily and day out. So a smart city really speeds up the use of this technology, and people now will actually value where they are now, whether they will still rent a place in a city or they would like to move out and go into the rural of this part of this country. But most important is with the smart city technology and resilience programs, the pandemic can be controlled, can be curtailed, can be made known to human beings how they need to actually move forward. So as my friend from UN consultants in Holland, it is actually, we need to move in tandem with all this under this architecture, integral approach to healthy design, using the interior, architecture, product in order to have a more healthy urban scale. And there has to be these 4-pronged items that needs to work together, focusing on community, performance, health, and sustainability. And we need also to balance this tripartite agreement between a quality good urban design which deals with productive, livable, and sustainable in a city in order to create this leadership, design excellence, and well-being of the city. And the healthiness as well as governance through good urban design will create a healthy city for us to move forward and live beyond this pandemic situation. And we need to really press upon ourselves the mental stability apart from the social and physical. So we need to move really, really, really good. And at last, the consideration that we need to move forward is, apart from just handling disaster risk management and climate change, we need also to control COVID-19. That's my suggestion and proposition. I hope to receive some questions. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada AR Mustapha di atas pembentangan yang sangat menarik sebentar tadi. Tanpa melengahkan masa, saya ingin menjemput pembentang yang ketiga, iaitu IR Santha Kumaran dengan tajuk pembentangan Renewable Energy for Sustainable Low Carbon City. Untuk makluman semua, Engineer Santha Kumaran dari The Institute of Engineer Malaysia. Beliau tidak lagi asing dalam kalangan jurutera Malaysia di mana beliau sangat aktif dalam teknologi hijau. Engineer Santha telah berkhidmat di beberapa negara dan begitu berminat dalam inovasi perkembangan bandar rendah karbon. Dipersilakan, IR.
Hello, selamat sejahtera. Me, Santha Kumaran, representing IEM. We are in the series of talk regarding the low carbon cities initiative by Malaysian Ministry of Environmental and Water, and of course arranged by Malaysian Green Tech Corporation, MGBC. Okay, we're going to talk about what do you call that, low carbon cities and the initiative that have been taken by Malaysian government coincide with the Paris Agreement. That means we're going to cover generally more items, but focusing on engineering, because I'm representing Institute Engineers of Malaysia. Definitely I will touch on engineering aspects. Without further ado, let me share the screen. Okay. As you can see from the slides, let me go to the home. Right. Give me a second. All right. Oh, yeah, the first page, yeah. Norma baru Bandar Rendah Karbon, renewable energy for sustainable low carbon cities. As I said earlier, this is a new normal, but the energy, we have to continue to conserve it, right? So we're going to focus on the renewable energy for sustainable low carbon city. Yeah, we have seen many times renewable energy. So what's new today? We will see in a short while. Yeah. It's new normal, yet we are not compromising on energy. We will talk about it later. For engineers, the goal is efficient design, not just any RE or renewable energy. Because renewable energy, we have a lot, many different kind of renewable energy. But what actually really effective or efficient in terms of government policy, investment, and technologies, because different country, different climate, different technologies, different expertise. So the engineers and the government will have to think, will have to speak the truth and the facts suits the countries. We are in Malaysia. We will speak in the context of Malaysia, and with my comparison with big giants like India and China later on. That's why they are called engineers, the movers ever thinking. Innovation doesn't happen overnight, though sometimes it does. We're going to blend the technologies from 200 years ago, maybe, like wind turbine, water. All those are old technologies when people were so enthusiastic. A lot of invention happened a long time ago. It's how engineers look at things and transform into workable. We have to touch on what's happening around the world at the moment. besides the pandemic. There are some climate ambition summit is going on under initiative by United Kingdom, France, with partnership with Chile and Italy. It started on the December 12th. That was about exactly 5 years after Paris Agreement. I've been following up via what do you call that? International news. All right, they're actually doing it live from morning until night through online. Of course, we have to go to the United Nations webpage, and then we can see there are about 70 countries involved in this climate ambition summit. The summit highlights the fast-growing coalition of countries, cities, regions, businesses, investors committing to net zero emissions. The keyword, net zero emissions, and boasting ambitions in climate finance and resilience and adaptation. Zero emissions meaning here, whatever the carbon dioxide be emitted will be absorbed back. Many countries, or some countries, have achieved it. Obviously, they have less industries in their country, like Bhutan in Philippines, the island Palawan. All right, they are net zero emissions. Wonderful, yeah? Clean air. This coincides with our series of talks since September 2020 by Malaysian Green Tech Corporation, MGBC, together with the Malaysian government Ministry of Environmental and Water. Paris Agreement, just to recall a bit, which happened in 2015 rather. The Paris Accord adopted in 2015 and signed a year later, is designed to boost greenhouse gas emissions mitigations worldwide. Its main goals include keeping the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius and efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees in bid to reduce the impact and the that is all about Paris Agreement. One sentence, but it's going to take a huge efforts around the world. Cannot be done by 1 or 2 countries. We are talking about the world level. Alright, we move on. The drive for the low carbon cities. Our topic is definitely low carbon cities. We cannot run away from that. But what are the drives? Okay, to achieve the goals of Paris Agreement, there's a pressing need to accelerate and strengthen the technological innovations. That's where the engineers comes in. It shall deliver environmentally and socially sound, cost-effective, and better performing climate technologies on a larger and more widespread scale. But there is no one-size-fits-all approach. There's no one-point solution. Different innovation approaches are needed. So the drive is actually the secret, the open secret is renewable energy. The main drive for low carbon is renewable energy. In Malaysian chapter, we are also in support of Paris Agreement, definitely. Our former prime ministers, we have a few prime ministers last 5 years, I think. They all agreed together with ministers and GRCs that have started renewable energy initiatives. It's an ongoing activities. That is, this talk is a part of it. All right. However, we are still in early stage, but it's a bit too late for us as a Malaysia. Nevertheless, we need to accelerate. Other countries already move on. We will see towards the end what the other countries are doing actually. The technologies are ever changing. We need to harness all kind of technologies. We need engineers, young engineers, innovators. There's no shorter way. Every aspect and lesson from other countries are warranted. Renewable energy in Malaysia, we narrow down to 3 for today's talk. It's enough for 15 minutes talk. Yeah, we look into solar, wind, and geothermal. Solar power. Many Asian countries have started solar power in a bigger scale called solar farm. India and China, they have a bigger land. So, the size of not just one football field, maybe two. But the result, the outcome is tremendous. Very good. All right. Malaysia too, we have some plants. All right. The advantages: no pollution, clean air, habitat for wildlife and plants, and no noise pollution. No noise. It's silent. All right. The disadvantages, of course, there are weather. The sun, the radiance, the intensity have to be good throughout the year. Malaysia, maybe we are lucky. We have that. India, they have. Indonesia, Philippines. We in Southeast Asia, we are grateful. We have the sunshine throughout the year. All right. Habitat for, no, it's a disadvantage, right? Initial investment is quite high. Initial investment. And need bigger space. The space to install the solar panels. As a technology becoming common, the cost has reduced tremendously. That's good news. There may be more disadvantages. However, with more research and development, there must be some solutions. These are the typical solar farm. Huge. You can see from one end to another end, like a peak lake, I will say. But it's easy to install if we know the technologies. Wind power, relatively new technology and not tested, really tested in Malaysia. But the opportunities cannot be denied. Currently widely used in Germany, Holland, Belgium, France, and of course in the United States of America. Benefits: it's renewable, sustainable, free air, free wind, clean, environmental friendly, and cost effective. Disadvantages in terms of technology, that there are. In terms of technologies, there are some disadvantages. Besides the technologies disadvantages, we got fluctuation of wind and good wind sites. We need some kind of a velocity, noise, aesthetic pollution, and high initial cost. Regarding the wind velocities, actually there are studies that's been done. Small wind velocities are actually adequate to generate power. But we need a huge wind turbine. We'll see in the next photo. There you are. There are two different scenarios. One installed on the highlands, mountainous place, and the other side is on the sea. If you look at the vanes of the fans, it's huge. That's the reason a small velocity is enough to generate, to rotate the generators to produce electricity. Geothermal, it's definitely new around the world. Not to say new, for some countries the technologies are new. Still, in early stage in Malaysia, though studies have been done, believe me, studies have been done in Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah, and there's some potential. All right, the advantages: relatively high compared to fossil fuel generated energy. That's a great advantage. Very small carbon footprint and readily coexist in natural habitat. Disadvantages: geothermal energy has high initial capital cost. Geothermal sites may experience dry spell. I mean, if they do not have enough the hot stuffs under our earth or inside our earth, and need more technical expert to convince the system. We need experts. These are typical how the geothermal works. Deep from the earth, the hot water, very hot water, maybe up to 300 degrees Celsius. When it comes out with the pressure differences, the water becomes steam and generate the turbine and produce electricity. And the remaining We're not going to throw it out to channel it to the river or whatever. It will channel back into a cooling tower to cool it down from steam or water back to the water and go back to the ground. So it's internal circulations. It's quite clean and the concept easy, yet the technology is quite tough. All right. Yeah. This is my last slide, but I would like to touch a little on the as an ending note, what happened around Southeast Asia. Singapore Prime Minister, in this climate change ambition initiative by France and UK, he has committed, saying that he's going to phase out all the internal combustion vehicles by 2040. That's a huge promise, commitment. There's no internal combustion cars or vehicles by 2040. They have good public transport. They have MRTs and LRTs. They can do. All right. Low carbon solutions. They are very much into low carbon solutions. Green financing. Okay, what happened in India? I'm touching the big countries in Asia, like India and China. India is investing, studying more efforts in terms of science. They are confident they will go beyond the Paris Agreement. Their solar power is big, one of the biggest in the world. And forest safeguard, they are doing it. They are guarding their forests. And they are fourth renewable energy country in the world. Fourth. They are growing. They're putting serious effort. China, similar. They have committed by 2040, 2050, they want to achieve the kind of zero net emissions, CO2. All right. Also, this is a final note. A young girl by the name of Greta Thunberg have voiced out the frustration among youngsters. She's very unhappy with what's happening around the world. That we cannot achieve the kind of thing that we cannot achieve the Paris Agreement. Well, we know it's not easy. All right. Engineers, my advice is follow the footsteps of Greta Thunberg. Because when you're talking about 2040, now it's 2020, 20 years from now, we all will be old. Old engineers will be older. So we are depending on the young engineers. So in spite of just, not just criticizing, but put more effort, study engineering, come out as innovators, contribute. The technologies may not available in Malaysia at the moment, but in other countries like Europe, US, we have to learn, okay, and put into practice. Come forward, study hard. It's not easy in the beginning, but definitely with the intelligent guys, you know what I'm talking about. All right, the science, technologies, mathematics, maths, you have to be good in that. Go strive. All right, come out with your own innovatives. It starts from now. You guys probably now 20 or early 20s. All right, follow the footsteps of Greta Thunberg. All right, thank you very much for everybody who had patience to listen last maybe 15-20 minutes. Okay, bye. See you again. Me, Santha Kumaran. Bye.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada IR Santha Kumaran di atas pembentangan sebentar tadi. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, sesi webinar akan diteruskan dengan sesi pembentangan yang kedua daripada 3 pembentang iaitu MGBC, MAESCO dan GreenRE. Pembentang pertama pada sesi kedua ini adalah AR Serina Hijjas dari MGBC dengan tajuk pembentangan From Building to Township Cities, Greening Our Environment. This generation architect, Serina Hijjas, is one of the creative partners at Hijjas Architect and Planners and is known for changing the building landscape of architect through buildings that are responsive, energy conscious and bold. Her formative years exposed her to an energy efficient and sustainable design starting from the Harold Watt University to the new Shell and Cellcom Tower. The approach to design is holistic and environmental sustainable with a view in generating a new strategy in every project. Currently, Hijjas is working on an urban regeneration and waste to energy project. Serina lectures on rethinking sustainability and is a working member of Green Building Index and Malaysia Green Buildings Council. Please welcome.
Good afternoon, my name is Serina Hijjas. I am representing Malaysia Green Building Council. I'm a member of the council as Vice President, which is also Malaysia Green Building Council is under the World Green Building Council globally. My topic for today is from buildings to cities, greening our environment. And I want to take you through basically the aspects of greening our environment before we come into the bigger picture of low carbon cities. So the new normal, or the new normal going forward from now, which is being presented, is for the low carbon cities or Bandar Rendah carbon. In this case, this is a 6th series in a series of presentations that have already been made across Malaysia in order for us to bring the knowledge of building from green buildings to townships to cities, what it takes for us to start to change the built environment in Malaysia and towards a bigger picture of climate change and responding to climate change. So I'm a council member of the Malaysia Green Building Council, and we represent all industries with regards to green buildings in Malaysia. From the inception in Malaysia, just to give you a little bit of a bigger picture, in 2007, Malaysia started its Code of Energy Efficiency in buildings, and we already saw a transformation in buildings that was starting to adopt energy efficiency in designing and construction of buildings. In about 2007, there was a release of green building tools. The first of it was Green Building Index, which is design tools for green buildings by PAM and ACM. Following that, with the onset of the tools, we noticed that the built environment in terms of construction, green building materials and appliances started to grow in momentum. Due to the reason of the green building tools. We started to introduce, for example, low water, in terms of low water usage in toilet fixtures, low VOC in paints, sustainable timber, to green concrete. And so the green tools started basically a change in the built environment in terms of a lot more green materials were made locally and available for construction. Between the time of 2009 and 2015, township tools, the low carbon cities framework, which is part of the topic of today, renewable energy and clean energy started to grow in its momentum. And by 2015, we saw that the United Nations released what was called the Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason for this was that Sustainable Development Goals covered a much bigger national and international approach to sustainability. And this could be adopted by corporations, not only the build construction, but corporations and other institutions. We then saw from that green financing, or in Malaysia, for example, is called Sukuk, started to grow momentum, especially in the infrastructure construction. Smart cities and industry, ecological by design, to repair the nature, adaptation, towards net zero, towards carbon and net zero energy started to become more popular in 2020, which is this year. The World Green Building Council, based in the United States, has started basically getting all the GBCs to consider to move towards a net zero energy. What does this mean? It means we don't consume more than what we are actually producing. And Malaysia GBC is developing a net zero energy tool for us to advance this towards 2030 and 2050 targets. So our target, I think in terms of nationwide, is a target of 20% renewable energy, and Malaysia's target is 45% reduction in carbon emission intensity by the year 2030. Now that's not a very long time, that's about 10 years from now. So in the built environment, we started to see with Green Building Index sometime in 2009, the adoption of MS 1525, which is our national standard in terms of energy efficiency, which is adopted in a lot of states already. In a lot of Kuala Lumpur, Penang, Johor, have all adopted basically MS 1525 as the base minimum for construction of new buildings that are coming up. At the same time, Green Building Index also adopted these MS 1525, and we generally say that if you are a certified green building, you're already getting 20% energy reduction. When you go for a silver building, your energy reduction is about 35% energy reduction. When you go for gold building, it's about 35 to 45 energy reduction. And when you go to a platinum, you're obviously hitting a much bigger target of something like 45 to 60% energy reduction. Now we have already looked at the return of investment, because this becomes important when we're talking to developers. Why should we actually design buildings that are going to be more energy and water efficient with a much greater reduction? And that is because we're trying to lower the carbon of the buildings and its footprint within the Malaysian built environment, and this effectively brings down the carbon and would help towards climate change. We say that at the communities level, we have something like the Green Building Township, and we have up to this date about more than 25 townships that are already going green. I think from Malacca to parts of Penang, parts of Kuala Lumpur, there are smaller townships that are already adopting to go green in terms of its design. And when we look at buildings, we look at about 6 different types of criteria that runs from energy efficiency to innovation. But when we look at townships, we're looking at different aspects. We're looking at climate, water, and energy. We're looking at ecology and environment. We're looking at community planning and design. We're looking about proximity for people in terms of proximity of facilities. We're looking at better transportation and connectivity so we can reduce the amount of car use. The amount of car use and split of car use in transportation, we're still at a very high level of 70% of our nation is still using cars. And so we've got to really improve our public transportation and connectivity, what we call the last mile, in order for us to basically improve the transportation. Then we come into building and resources, and then we have business and innovation as part of considerations when we're looking at greening our townships. At the local level, neighborhoods, there's green neighborhoods and guidelines, and municipalities have their own incentives and best planning practice. Some municipalities are essentially defining specific locations. You are asking for water harvesting as a requirement to all buildings. So we're seeing some of these aspects in terms of adoption and specific adoption in municipalities. So if you are basically based in Malacca or you're based in Kedah, your municipality can adopt specific ones that are important to your location. and that becomes the new guidelines for any new development within your municipality. Some municipalities increase the amount of float ratio. You're allowed to build higher density as long as you've increased open space ratio, or you consider what we call something like a green plot ratio. What does it bring down? The heat island effect of your building within its environment. We can also look at essentially water and water capture in terms of MASMA, in effect to make the reduction of any form of flooding in your location. So these are all selections of green guidelines that you may adopt within your own municipality. At a national level, we have the Low Carbon Cities Framework. Now, the Low Carbon Cities Framework is an overall framework to calculate the amount of carbon reduction your city, your municipality is making. It still needs the support of green building tools like Green Building Index to calculate individual buildings and individual types of construction on the site. But together, both the tools of the green building tools and the low carbon cities framework allows you to measure the amount of carbon that you are using for your cities. So we know already there's a roadmap of 40 to 45 reduction of carbon emission intensity mentioned earlier. We also know there's a national landscape policy of at least 30% urban development areas as green areas. It's no surprise when we say Putrajaya is probably one of the greenest new cities being developed, because they have more than 30% green areas. Something like Kuala Lumpur is up at about 9.5% of green areas. Somewhere like Malacca may be of a different percentage. So the reason for greening your environment is to reduce the heat island effect and to mitigate the climate change and temperature difference that we are already going. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that later on, because we are already seeing a 1.5 degree change in certain locations. Measured at Bayan Lepas is already a 1.5 degree change in Pulau Penang. Now, this can be said that probably this means, and Singapore as well, that the climate change of 1 degree has already occurred. And so it's really imperative that we consider ecology, biodiversity in the city planning, townships and new townships. So when we have a requirement of 10% kawasan lapang, we really should relook that and consider up to 20% in terms of kawasan lapang or green space, whether that's in the rooftops of their buildings or within the landscape area. We really should be looking at this. With something like the future KL Singapore high-speed rail, this would mean that they will have better connectivity between the cities. We won't have to rely on flying per se. Increased public transportation within your municipality will have a very big impact to green the environment. And then, of course, at a smaller scale is developing our own national hybrid electric cars. Hybrid or electric cars. So part of the imperative here that's really important is greening Malaysia, so that we together can be building towards sustainability and reduce the climate change that we are already on a tangent towards. So there's a lot of green buildings that are out there, and that's in terms of 100 or 1,000 buildings. Measure the carbon difference that this is making, and obviously it's still a small percentage, and we have a long way to go, and it's imperative that we consider every point of construction or conversion of buildings to make it much greener. So for the amount of buildings built in the past 10 years that we have actually adopted green in Malaysia, there's been almost 1.18 million tons of CO2 reduction a year. What do we mean by this when we say reduction per year? It's the measured amount of water and energy that we've been able to reduce by being more efficient with our buildings, more efficient with our infrastructure, construction, electricity and water, and that has given us a measurement of a 1.18 million tons of CO2 reduction. Now that's equivalent to almost 5,324 kilometers square of forest. Or let's give you a bigger picture, it's almost equivalent to 22 times the area of Kuala Lumpur in terms of greening and forest, putting down forests. So it just gives you the sense of perspective in terms of what CO2 translates to. It's equivalent to 243,000 cars on the road. Kuala Lumpur itself, Wilayah Persekutuan itself, has more than 5 million people, and we have more than 5 million types of vehicles. Everything from motorbikes to peroduas, to cars, to lorries, to trucks. So the amount of cars, trucks and vehicles that we have on the road is really quite high. So when we make this kind of savings per year by greening buildings, we are basically taking almost 250,000 of cars off the roads. What we like to say to you is that it's really important you consider greening from the buildings to the cities, is that you have an overall improved thermal performance of your building. If you can reduce the amount of, in terms of absorption of heat on your building into the office spaces by building below 50 watts per meter square, then your overall thermal comfort inside building, especially when we're building in a tropical environment, it's really important that we actually have what we call in Malaysia GBC, cooler buildings, cooler environment. If we can cool down our building without excessive air conditioning by passive design, by appropriate facades, then we are actually working with our tropical environment. So there is another term that we use when we're doing construction. We measure the amount of energy by the term called building energy intensity. And we found that we have been able to reduce up to 50.1% of energy reduction as compared to a typical Malaysian office building. So all the old buildings are about 250, and we're seeing that if you go for just a certified building or a gold building, you're already reducing between 30 and 40%. And so it means that if you save amount of energy, you save amount of money and electricity bills as well at the same time. So on average, we're seeing that from the typical no greening of buildings, they're working at about 250. And now the average BI of any of the GBI buildings are running at about 124. So you can see that's almost 50% or 50.1% reduction. And so what does that mean in terms of households? It means we're saving amount of electricity equivalent to almost 200,000 Malaysian households. And every household is between 3.3 to 4 persons in per household. So that's a lot. That's about 2.4% of Malaysian households, especially when there are bigger projects, obviously. And we're seeing that more and more residential apartments are starting to become greener, even going up as high as platinum, in order to bring the energy consumption, the performance of the building to be cooler buildings, much more to the public. And this is equivalent to this amount of energy saving that we're seeing. So from carbon, we basically have related energy consumption and efficiency to carbon, and that is is equivalent to about 388 million per year, which is a lot of cost savings. And also for certain states where energy, water, we're especially seeing that water, even though we are in a tropical environment, and we think that for most part of the year we get enough rainfall. The trick is that Malaysian consumes one of the highest amounts of consumption of water in the world compared into the UN standards. And that's because we believe we have so much water, and yet we are actually suffering quite a bit of water reduction and dry spells that's affected some of the major city centers in Malaysia. So we mentioned how much it is in terms of equivalent to electricity of households. Another aspect that is becoming more and more critical for us is waste diverted from landfill. So this is important if we can be more efficient with our material resources, and also in terms of recycling. This mention about the 3R and 4R. We can divert as much as currently we've diverted from all the projects that you've seen here, round about 200, almost 200 tons to recycling centers. That's equivalent to almost 104 football fields. So, so you can imagine if you're piling up that amount of waste, this waste diversion is becoming more and more important. I think a lot of us have obviously seen the damage of plastics and the permanency of the damage of plastics, especially in our oceans, and cleaning up our oceans are just as important as it affects our fisheries, which affects our food chain for us. So we talked about energy, but we haven't really talked about water. And water rain harvesting is becoming quite important in a lot of municipalities now. They're basically encouraging in every household to consider rainwater harvesting. I think especially in more urban city centers are considering that this should become now a requirement. And what does this mean? The rainwater harvesting together with water recycling or water efficient fittings means that currently we've been able to reduce up to 19.4 billion liters a year, which is equivalent to about 63,000 Malaysian households. And from rain harvesting alone is about 9.1 billion. From the water efficient fittings, so breaking down the 19.4, you can see that there's a lot more if you get water efficient fittings right now. I don't know about yourselves, but the use of water for shower and all the rest of it, as I mentioned before, we are one of the highest globally when measured by the United Nations. So there are different types of buildings. The typology of buildings that have gone green have been from the McDonald's has gone green with some of their outlets. Shell stations are starting to go. We're starting to see that the highway toll locations are also just now coming in to become green buildings, to hospitals, to shopping centers, to office buildings, to residential. So there's a whole range of buildings that have gone. And to cater to different typologies of building, because it's almost like saying it's a motorbike, it's a lorry, it's a car. The efficiency of use of oil for any one of these vehicles are different. The same as for green buildings. Different buildings work for different operational times, different energy consumption, different water consumption, and that's why there is more than 18 different tools to basically meet all these requirements. But when we come to greening a township, the considerations are quite different. So if you have a township outside or within your municipality, which is 150 acres or 200, and they're coming in for planning submission to you for the KM, then you really are looking to see whether they've made some considerations towards a green township. And just like buildings, we have 6 core criteria. There are 6 core criteria when you're considering greening a township or sustainable township. The first is considerations of climate, energy, and water. The second is the
Saya cakap
consideration
soalan ni,
of
tak
the
kata
quality
ni.
environment to your location.
Soalan alternatif
The
ni.
third is community planning, which is very, very important. And that includes diversity, that includes cycling routes, that includes connectivity, that includes designing for handicap, for the old. So this is quite important. Then there is transportation and connectivity. Obviously, when these new townships come, if there is no public transportation like buses and frequencies to other locations, then we are not servicing proper infrastructure for these cities to connect. Building and resources, when we're building these cities, if we can have lower impact of the resources, so much the better. And this idea of business and innovation to do a sustainable township, I have seen moving into perimeters of Ipoh, for example. There are some cities that are actually dying because most of them have moved already to city centers and the original inhabitants have actually moved. So how can we repopulate that and bring. So it's really important to look at the business aspect of that. And then innovation are ideas that we take into the planning above and beyond what we already see here. So in the big picture, the climate pandemic has only emphasized and brought a sense of urgency to most of us, in the sense of climate change is already impacting us. Now you might say, what has disease or health and wellness got to do with climate? We're seeing that the effects of the migration of animals and things like that, due to us basically growing and affecting them, has also impacted. And this is the effects of pandemic on cities. The Malaysian Green Building Council, together with the World Green Council, has actually released something called Health and Wellbeing Framework, which is sitting above green buildings, low carbon cities, as another big important aspect for us to consider. So in the year 2020, we are here. We have to already consider low energy and resource efficiency right here and right now. And we should be already considering that we are reducing between 30 to 50% in terms of our energy, water, and resources. And we have to adopt health and well-being as a framework. But moving forward in the next 10 years, we really have to adopt a more advancement of what we call a near net zero or advancing net zero. And what this means is we must be able to produce enough energy for ourselves by solar energy or other forms of renewable energy. We must be cognizant that we are to grow more trees, create more water catchments. Just imagine that the less green we have, the less water catchment we will have. So increasing renewable energy, ecology, and biodiversity is going to be increasingly important for us to basically climate-proof ourselves. And because we've already reached the green ceiling, and flattening the climate curve is really important to all of us. Thank you very much.
Cepatlah, sambung.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada AR Serina Hijjas di atas pembentangan yang menarik sebentar tadi. Kepada semua peserta, sebarang persoalan boleh diajukan di bahagian Q&A dan akan dijawab oleh panel pembentang. Seterusnya, saya ingin menjemput pembentang yang kedua iaitu IR Phang Faut dari MAESCO dengan tajuk pembentangan How Selecting the Right Chiller Can Complement Normal Baharu Bandar Rendah Karbon. IR Phang Faut is a registered PE with BEM, Asian engineer registered with APEC, IPE, engineer, a fellow of IEM, member of CIBSE, and also a certified energy auditor. Please welcome.
Due to chiller energy use and direct emissions of refrigerant. These two are the main parameters that we're going to talk about. I mean, because of the time constraint, we'll be looking at 3 small and simple changes you can make in your state to ensure a lasting difference in reducing greenhouse gas emission. Now, we're going to talk about number 1, selecting the right chiller for the right application, and number 2, selecting the right refrigerant, and number 3, automate it. Now, Siemens has carried out our study on the energy usage in office building. And as you can see, lightings in any building take up 31%, others 17%, others can be like for lift or for any other trades. And aircon, just believe it or not, aircon take up 52% of the total electric usage. That is a lot of electricity use. Now let's look at a typical. This graph is based on the old ASHRAE reading, where it states that chillers take up 40%. Well, this is a very conservative figure, conservative percentage, and it might go up. Now, what we do is, if you total up the chillers, the pumps, the AHU, the cooling towers, and which encompass the whole HVAC system, it uses roughly around 52% of a total building power, out of which chillers consume approximately 35 to 45% of the total building power. And from here you can see that chiller being the largest power consumer. And when you select a right type of chiller, it can reduce your building power bill by 15 to 20%, which thus will then reduce your carbon consumption. Now let's look at why it's possible for energy optimization, especially for all existing buildings. Now let's look at the designer point of view. When we design a building, let's take this building for instance. When we design the building, we always base on a very hot day. And the building material, the U value is estimated. And we have always put in a high fresh air intake temperature. In Malaysia, usually we base it in 31 degrees C. And the building, and our assumption is always that the building is fully occupied. And the person per square feet is the highest. And number 6, equipments are all turned on. 7, lights are all turned on as well. Now, you may ask yourself, how does all this affect you? Now, in MS 1525 2014, now Malaysian standard gazetted in Parliament, and it was endorsed by consulting engineers and chillers manufacturers in Malaysia. Now, this is the formula that we use to study the chiller operation in any building. This is MS 1525 2014, Malaysia Court Load Value. And if you notice, there's 0.01A, 0.29B, 0.65C, and 0.05D. Now, what does this all mean? 0.01, it refers to 1%. A means 100%. That means even if the chiller running 100% is only at 1% of the time. And B refer to 75%, C is 50%, and D is 25%. So you can interpret it the same way like what I've said in the beginning. Let's say 0.29 stroke B, that means 29% of the time is running at 75% value. And 65% of the time is running at 50% value. And last but not least, 5% of the time are running at 25% load. Now, what does it all mean in layman terms? In layman terms, it means that this is what it means. For a building to be full load occurs only 1%. 100%. If I were to later translate it into timing, that means 100% load of the chiller load is only operating 100% at 14.4 minutes, 75% load at 7 hours, 50% load at 15.5 hours, 25% load at 1.2 hours. But what does it mean? It means that you must select a chiller that can run optimally at part load. Don't always look at 100% load because it may not be good for you. And chillers, when you run at part load, will give you more and more issues later on. Now let's look at, there are so many brands in the market today. Let's look at it. Now, chillers in Malaysia, we have Chen, we have Bush, we got York, we got Carrier, we got Datin, and we got Hitachi, we got Geoclima, we got ADCO, we got BSE, and many more. There's so many brands in the market. And also, there's so many standards that we are following.
Sebelah aku tolong angkat Syah punya pintu, dia lupa bawa kunci.
Eurovan certified performer.
Angkat je lah.
The other one is Japan International
Tak ada apa pun,
Standard.
tapi itulah.
And last but not least is a GB.
Boleh angkat je kan?
China
Macam tak kunci pun tak apa.
Now,
Aku salah dia masa dia nak masuk. Aku ada tu. Cleaner 2 orang tu ada.
And that's the standard we should
kan?
follow. HRI 550/590. Actually 90.1, and in Malaysia is 1 and Malaysian standard 1525 2014. Now you may not need to read all this, but let me summarize for you what does it say. Now, what constitutes a good chiller plant, kilowatt per ton, as stated in HRI 550/590. Now, as you can see, what does this chart mean? This chart means the average annual chiller plant efficiency in kilowatt per ton, COP, which include input energy, chillers, cooling towers, condenser, and chill water pumping. Now, for currently, in order for you to qualify under the excellent rating, you must go below 0.7 kilowatt per ton. That means when you add up your kilowatt for your chillers, for your tower fans, condensers, and chill water pumping, is below 0.7. Now, this is how you select a very good chiller. Bear in mind that you must suit the chiller selection to your industry need. For example, let's say for hospital got a very high load disparity. You may use a very high load at one time and very low load at the other. Or hotel, it's the same thing. And you must look also at your operating hours, your current M&E infra, your existing equipment limitation, your budget and financial requirement. Bear in mind, every chiller, the operation itself, has carbon footprints. So the chiller carbon footprint started from 1980. CFC chillers the carbon footprint is roughly 21,050 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And as time goes by, and right now we're in more than year 2020, we are emitting less than 10,000 metric CO2. So please do not use old chillers. Do look at the new chillers, because every new chiller, they are progressing pretty well to suit the time that we are in. And always look at Malaysian standard table 25, water chilling packages, electrically driven, where it states what chiller to use at what percentage. Let's say, for example, if you're looking for a 500-ton chiller. Now, 500-ton chiller, it falls here. That means 3 to 600 RT. You use a water-cooled centrifugal chiller. Always refer to Malaysian standard 1525, 2025, table 2014, because this table already been back through by most consultants and also the chiller vendors. They qualify themselves that this is all achievable standards. Now let's look at the other one, air cool. or versus water-cooled chiller performance charts. You must know all these charts, because if you select the wrong chiller for a wrong application, it's like a baby. The life cycle of the chiller is roughly 20 years. And if you select the wrong chillers, you are stuck with the chillers for the next 20 years. So we'll always be aware of all these charts. These charts are taken from ASHRAE. And this is another chart. This another chart will tell you, okay, what's the difference? A centrifugal chiller, a reciprocal chiller, screw chiller, centrifugal and magnetic bearing. And if you look at the percentage here, percentage loading against a kilowatt per ton, if you notice centrifugal reciprocal screw, as you go lower, if you buy a chiller and you operate below 50%, it has no benefit for you. Your kilowatt per ton will go up instead of going down. So do not buy a chiller and run it at part load. They are not designed for that kind of application. If you are not very sure on the percentage or the loading that your building has, do buy a magnetic bearing chiller. A magnetic bearing, it can operate pretty well from 15% right up to 100%. But magnetic bearing chiller is not cheap. They are not cheap. They are more than 50 to 60% higher than a normal electric chiller. But one thing good about magnetic bearing is there's no oil. When there's no oil, it will help you in your operation when there will be less maintenance costs. You may ask, what about for those old chillers? Old chillers now. For old chillers, what we recommend is you can install variable speed drive. You can install variable speed drive to your cooling tower fan, to your condenser pump, to your chillers, to your chill water pump. Install variable speed drive. Well, variable speed drive cut energy costs and reduce carbon emission by up to 20% compared with all traditional chillers. Now, there are many other benefits of variable speed drive. It can be used to start and stop the motor, significantly reduces in-rush current to less than full load amps, current power factor close to unity, reduces utility electrical demand, regulates compressor speed to provide the most efficient chiller operation, reducing part load energy consumption. Now let's look at this chart. This chart is also taken off from ASHRAE. This one will tell you the difference between constant speed, constant CFD, or constant speed, or variable speed with HRI relief, and variable speed, HRI relief, plus oil-free. This all been stated here, so you need to know what you are buying. Now, secondly, let's look, you must select the right refrigerant. These are pretty important. Malaysian standard, MS 2678, 2017, Flammable Refrigerant System Code of Practice, where it states that selecting low global warming potential refrigerant chillers for space cooling, GWP is a measure of warming effect of a gas relative to the warming effect of the equivalent amount of carbon dioxide, usually over a 100-year period. By switching to low GWP refrigerants, company can help reduce our greenhouse gas emission arising from the refrigeration and air conditioning sector. Now, why choosing the right refrigerant is important. Picking a chiller based on refrigerant alone can result in unintended consequences for the owner and the environment. You need to know. There are many parameters why we have to choose the right refrigerant. It can be a safety code compliance, operator training, insurance costs, reliability, legal risk, stability, efficiency, capacity, low GWP, and many more. Now, if you look at the Malaysian standard, CFC R11, R12 already been phased out. And on Malaysia, in Malaysia context, CFC R22 and R123 is phasing out program in place. And 134A, R32 phasing down schedule on the way. Natural hydrocarbon 290 increasingly creeping on board. And currently, we are using a lot of HFC 134A and HFC 41A are prevalent. So do catch up with the current situation and know what refrigerant can be used and what cannot be used. Now this all I've listed down the refrigerants allowed and not allowed. So do take a note on all those as allowed and which is not allowed. Now let's come to the last segment. Last segment is the chiller management system. If you buy a very expensive chiller, very expensive pumps and cooling towers, but if you do not have the brain to control each and every one of these equipment, you're down to square one. So it's always good to invest in a very good chiller management system. Now, it's imperative you incorporate chiller management system to your central cooling plant. The main benefits include maximize comfort, compliance, and performance, increase efficiency, increase reliability, reduce energy costing, reduce operating costs, improve sustainability, reduce downtime, attractive payback. Now, all these are the main benefits. Now, let's look at this chart. This is all in 2003, the kilowatt per ton is roughly 1.4. And let's say in 2017 is 0.513. Now, the thing is, if you choose the right chiller management system, you may be able to control your plant room to below 0.5. It is achievable. Now, this is a sample of how you can control the chiller management system for all to work as one. Last but not least, always look at the life cycle cost. Bear in mind the chiller is a 20-year-old chiller, and do not buy based on initial costs, which includes equipment costs, installation, testing, commissioning. All these costs only represent a small percentage. You must always look at the future costs. The equipment energy consumption, equipment maintenance, availability of spare part, technical backup, equipment reliability and downtime, and minimize carbon footprint, lower environment costs. Now, initial cost is only 4.92%, whereas 95.08% are there. And if you choose the wrong chiller, you have to bear with the 95.08% cost for the next 20 years. So let's be smart and let's reduce the carbon footprint by selecting the right chiller. So I thank you. And if there's any question, do email to us and we are ready to talk to you anytime. Thank you.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada IR Phang di atas pembentangan yang menarik sebentar tadi. Tanpa melengahkan masa, saya ingin menjemput pembentang yang ketiga iaitu Puan Juanita Lourdes dari GreenRE Senyap Berhad dengan tajuk pembentangan Future Proofing Our Cities with Green Spaces. Puan Juanita Lourdes has held various sustainability roles in the past 12 years. Starting her career in sustainable agriculture in Malaysia Palm Oil Board, she is now the sales and marketing manager in GreenRE, promoting and raising awareness on green built environment. Please welcome.
Planning our cities and buildings and how it's quantified in green certification. According to the United Nations, the world's population is expected to reach 9.8 billion by 2050, a 2 billion increase from the current world population. And nearly 70% of this population is projected to live in urban areas, with close to 90% of this increase taking place in Asia and Africa. Considering the projected urbanization, it is imperative that upcoming cities are sustainable, since infrastructure built today will remain in place for the next 30 to 100 years. Additionally, cities account for up to 76% of global energy use and global greenhouse gas emissions. The building sector is responsible for about 1/3 of global energy consumption. Thus, green buildings and cities will be key to meeting decarbonization targets and limiting global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. Despite cutbacks and re-evaluation of mega projects in Malaysia, the residential and non-residential sector is projected to grow in the next decade. However, less than 1% of Malaysia's building stock is currently green certified, versus Singapore and London, which are approaching 40 to 60% respectively. Currently, completed green buildings stand at less than 200, and this includes all certification available in Malaysia. It can be said that the green certification industry here in Malaysia is still in very early stages, hence there's immense opportunity for various stakeholders in the industry. Considering the projected urbanization, here's a short video of one of the issues that is faced by sprawling cities, urban heat island effect. With the continued expansion of towns and cities, urban development has significantly impacted the natural environment. In addition to the urban heat island effect, the other common environmental issues faced by cities include loss of biodiversity, loss of ecosystem services, flooding, air pollution, and management of waste. The inclusion of green spaces, which are considered green infrastructure in our cities, adds immense value in terms of reinstating ecosystem services and urban biodiversity, on top of aesthetic and psychological benefits. As local authorities play a monumental role in the allocation of land and space, how much do we actually need? Well, if we go by WHO's recommendation, they recommend 9 square meters of urban green space for each person that is accessible, safe, and functional. Going beyond that, a generous allocation would be 50 meters square per person. With limitations in space and skyrocketing land prices in cities, urban planners and local authorities need to continuously find more creative ways to weave nature into cities. It doesn't necessarily have to take form of sprawling parks. Green spaces can include a wide range of environments, from designated parks and recreational grounds to more natural areas such as riverbank corridors, green roofs, living walls, and tree-lined streets. The promotion of green spaces both within and surrounding urban environments is strongly associated with the occupants' physical and mental well-being. Here are various possible types of urban green space, from urban forests to allotment gardens to detention and retention ponds, domestic rain gardens, as well as building integrated vegetation such as green roofs, green walls, and climbing plants. One such example that I would like to highlight here are green roofs. Although installation of green roofs usually involves higher upfront costs than a traditional roof, there are many economic and environmental benefits that can make up for this. The diagram on the bottom right shows you examples of how a green roof can work. It can help reduce the urban heat island effect and contribute to improving the air quality in the area. In terms of economic benefits, green roof can reduce the R value the R value is the roof insulation capabilities of a building, hence lessening cooling needs, resulting in energy cost savings. It also can improve stormwater management in towns. If you look at the top right table, this is a research by the Center of Green Roof Research that shows that green roofs can capture up to 80% of rainfall during a rainstorm compared to 24% of a typical standard roof. As green roof plants mature and root systems grow, stormwater retention can also increase. It also provides potential for urban farming and vertical farming. Urban farms, allotments, and even rooftop permaculture farms could assist in reducing the pressure to convert further land to agricultural land by supplying city dwellers in the vicinity with locally produced food sources, as well as providing a refuge for wildlife and a community-managed green farm, which provides an educational experience for the younger generation. Also highlight the benefits of greenery in healthcare facilities. Numerous research has found significant benefits of added greenery in hospitals. This is Khoo Teck Puat Hospital in Singapore, which is one of the most biophilic hospitals in Asia. The hospital was built to incorporate biophilic principles such as sight, visual access to greenery and water, smell, sound of falling water, diversity of plants, and community. The green plot ratio of KTPH reached 3.92, which is the combined total surface area of horizontal and vertical greenery is almost 4 times the size of the hospital grounds. Since the start of hospital operations, studies have found that improved environment has resulted in 8.5% reduction in hospital stays, 15% reduction in faster recovery, 22% reduction in need for pain medication, and 11% reduction in secondary infections. The next area that I would cover is the green plot ratio. Just in energy consumption, CO2 production, and other quantifiable measures are the foundation of our rating systems and sustainable policies. The green plot ratio is used as a metric to quantify the amount of greenery in an area. First published back in 2002, the GNPR can be used as an overall indicator to estimate the amount of carbon sequestration, water retention, and other environmental benefits of plants. Based on the leaf area index, LAI, GNPR is essentially the average LAI of a given build site. The primary benefit of GNPR is that it provides a numerical metric allowing greenery provisions to be calculated, measured, and regulated. Applied properly, GNPR provides an easy and reliable way to encourage more greenery in buildings. Next is the leaf area index, LAI, which is a component of GNPR. It is a dimensionless quantity that characterizes plant canopies. It is defined as a one-sided green leaf area per unit ground surface area. The bottom right table provides examples of LAI measurements for different classes of plants, shrubs, palms, and trees. Here I'd like to highlight a study using the CFT model that indicated that the cooling effect of a almost 2-hectare park depends on its LAI. In areas where LAI reached 3.16, the CEI, which is the cooling effect intensity, reached almost 5 Celsius. But in other areas of the park where the LAI was about 1.05, the CEI only reached about 1.2 Celsius. As you can see from the GNPR and LAI, the type of greenery in your project or development is just as important as the quantity allocated. In terms of green certification, GreenRE uses both GNPR and AI to determine the credit allocation. In a nutshell, the higher the GNPR, the higher the credit allocation. Here's an example of a project. In the first example, this project utilizes only turf as its greenery. With a percentage of 12.5% green area, it achieved a GNPR of 0.25. In the same project, but with turf and dense trees, the GNPR calculation achieved up to 1.37. Here's a snapshot of greenery requirements or landscape requirements instead by the local authorities in central Malaysia. DBKL has a 10% greenery requirement, MBPJ 10 to 15%, and the SA specifies 3 meter perimeter around your development around your building, and MPSJ specifies 10%. Role of green cities and green buildings in the futurescape of Malaysia's built environment. Green building certification comes into place. GreenRE, which stands for Green Real Estate, was set up by Rendah back in 2013 to drive sustainability in Malaysia's real estate industry. We also conduct green building training programs and awareness drives to increase market penetration of sustainable real estate. We are fully supported and recognized by Malaysian government and local authorities. And certified projects can qualify for income tax allowances and incentives under MITA and MOF. Our certification is based on Singapore's Green Mark and includes our local Malaysian standards and bylaws. It covers a multitude of applications aiming to create a positive impact on the real estate industry. Currently, GreenRE has a portfolio of more than 200 registered projects covering an area of 150 million square feet across Malaysia. With energy being a major focus, it is a major criteria in our certification requirements. These are a snapshot of components in our certification. Other parts include water, indoor environmental quality, carbon emissions, and greenery provision. With the expected continued expansion of the urban environment, natural habitats and biodiversity are in a fragile position. Green spaces and other nature-based solutions offer innovative approaches to increase the quality of urban settings, to enhance local resilience and promote sustainable lifestyles, which can improve both health and well-being of urban residents. Thank you.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Puan Juanita Lourdes di atas pembentangan sebentar tadi. Terima kasih kepada semua peserta yang masih bersama kami bagi webinar nombor baru Bandar Rendah Karbon jadikannya realiti. Tanpa melengahkan masa, kita akan meneruskan sesi pembentangan seterusnya daripada My Hijau Company. Pertama sekali adalah daripada Advisor Sendian Berhad. Pembentangan pertama bagi sesi ketiga